In this video, we are going to have a complete and full guide on how to do service delivery for a B2B lead generation agency. This is one of the final videos in my series sharing all of my learnings from growing my B2B lead gen agency to over $100,000 a month. I'm excited to share this with you today. Now, one thing I want to emphasize is everybody wants to talk about client acquisition and how you can charge as much as possible, and all those things are important. But the reality of it is, if you want to make real money, you need to have good retention and you need to have good service delivery. If people can't spend $1 with you and you make them more consistently, you will have constant churn and you'll be constantly fighting to get new clients. And you can't get rich off $3,000 setup fees. You only really build wealth when you can retain clients for multiple months and even years. So here, for example, you can see some of my top spending clients. A lot of these guys have been with us for years. And I'm going to share with you the exact fulfillment process we use to keep clients around for a very long time. I'll be breaking this into onboarding, strategy, domain and email setup and warm up, list building, script writing, campaign launches, appointment setting, reporting, scaling, and then a few bonus retention strategies and relevant tutorials, which will also be in the description. Now for onboarding, I literally just recorded a video on how to onboard B2B lead gen clients, which is on my channel and will be in the description. So this video focuses on everything that happens past onboarding, but if you do want to see that, it is on my channel a couple videos back, and again, it will be in the description. So we're going to start out today with strategy creation. Now, strategy creation is going to be one of the most important parts in your entire fulfillment process. This is where you set the path that you are going to follow with your client. It is really important that you do not take this lightly and you don't let your client or yourself skip through it, because this is where you're setting up the campaign ideas, the thought process behind them, and everything else that's going to matter a ton to actually get results. So let's start with strategy. By this time, you should already have defined exactly how many campaigns your client's going to have, along with how many contexts are allocated. For example, I normally have a cap of 4 or 5 unique campaigns per month for every client. Within those campaigns, I'll have A/B tests, and sometimes I'll either give them a specific amount of contacts per campaign, or they have a total amount of monthly contacts, which they can choose to divide however they want among the campaigns they have. But it should be already decided and signed in contract before you actually have a strategy session with your client. Now, you'll also be sending your client a onboarding form, which we went over in the last video on onboarding. And a lot of times a company will just skip through that, where they're like, oh, it's not that important. Let me just answer if 1 sentence or 2 sentences. If a client does that and they don't answer fully, I want to make a long list of questions for them that are going to help me best write copy for a business. A lot of times they think that, oh, this is just common knowledge, but in reality, they've been in their industry for 5, 10, 20 years, and you're just stepping into it. So it is really important that you get all of your questions answered, you understand who their customers are, what pain points they have, what competitive advantages they have, and everything you need to know about their business. So do not be shy to ask lots of questions on this call. You're also going to be seen as actually caring if you ask these questions, where if you just breeze over it, it's not good for anybody. You're going to lose your client. They're not going to get results. Nobody is happy. Now, also before this call, I like to have a list of campaign ideas. As opposed to just hoping that a cool idea comes to me on the call, I normally have a list of 10 to 15 unique campaign ideas that I can present on this call with a client. That way they can go through and narrow out which ones they're interested in or they think do or don't make sense depending on their author. So on this call, I'm going to go through, get all my questions answered, go for my campaign ideas, and then we want to go back and forth to figure out which campaigns they like, I like, and are possible to implement. Now I'm going to emphasize possible to implement. A lot of companies will come to you and say, we want companies that have 5 retail locations, do between 5 million to 10 million a year, have a sales team, and they're using X software. Well, that's really cool, but realistically, you can't build that list. Or if you could build that list for their cold email campaigns, you might get like 20 contacts. So it's really important that on the strategy call, you also set expectations into what lists are actually possible to build. Because it's not going to look good if you just say yes for the sake of saying yes, and then you can't actually implement on those campaigns. So I always prefer to take an honest and transparent approach from the very start. And if there's ever a campaign where I'm like, hey, I don't know if we can get this data, I will tell them that. I will go do my research R&D for 24 hours and I will get back to them normally on Slack where I communicate with my clients. Now for a few reasons, I also like to record my call. I use Fathom Note Taker, it's free. I like to record it so I can reference the notes when I script write. I also like it for liability reasons to show where they approve things on calls if I am doing on-call approvals. And lastly, you can even use that recording to build an AI model to help write your client scripts. That's the kind of advanced stuff we have in Grow B2B. Not going to be in this video, but if you are interested in that, check out Grow B2B, link in the description. Once we finish the strategy call, I go ahead and put together a really clear outline that explains the campaign, the thought process behind the campaign, and all the specifics such as company size, location, titles, industries, and everything else that's relate to actually building the list around this campaign. Then I send it to the client. I want to make it really clear. You want to tell your clients, once we build a list, we can't change it. Again, expectation setting is going to be key here for long retention. If you let your client say, I want to change a list after you've already built it, it's just going to cost you money, decrease your margins, and add frustration. So make it really clear. It's never a big deal as long as you're clear of it. Once you build a list, you can't change it. Now, you're going to have some back and forth with your client, and it's a good thing. You want to figure out what they do or don't like because they have insights that you probably don't have. And you also don't want them to be dismissive of the strategy just to be excited to get campaigns starting, because a lot of times they will just, whatever, we'll trust you, whatever. But you want to push them to really put effort into it because this is the most important thing for the rest of its fulfillment process. Now, once we have our strategy finished, we can move on to the next steps, which are actually building all the pieces needed to implement the strategy. Now that we've onboarded somebody and we have their strategy complete, the next step is domains and emails. Now, this is going to walk through the process behind them, but not the exact steps. You want to see exactly how to set up domains and emails. There are plenty of videos on my channel. So the first thing we're going to have here is we need to make sure we've already defined who's going to be paying for these domains and emails. Now, if you're doing management on a retainer, pay-per-lead, pay-per-call, normally the agency is going to be paying for domains and emails, but you want to make sure this is clear beforehand. As sometimes, even if you offer to pay, larger companies will want to own those domains and emails because they're associated to the brand name, and in that case, you can let them pay, or you can do slightly different ones that they're okay with. But it's important you have this defined before you start. I also don't like to transfer domains and emails to a client after a project ends, as that adds a lot of complexity and work, and I prefer just to have it set in stone, but that's not going to happen beforehand, and as long as they know, there's never been any issues. Now, from there, we want to make sure we get approval on all the domains and names and emails. We don't want any domains the client isn't happy with, and for names, we want to make sure it matches their sales reps or owners. I also don't like to make all the names around one salesperson. If that salesperson is fired, quits, dies, whatever, I don't want it to interrupt my campaign. So I prefer to diversify between multiple salespeople, or if it's just one salesperson, maybe use the owner's name, and then the salesperson can just take calls, and just have a transfer from the owner to a salesperson. It's pretty normal in sales anyway. Now, you do also want to have a clause that if they do change their domain names, maybe they rebrand, or if they do change the names on the emails, maybe someone's fired, you have a fee associated with. Because there is going to be cost to this, there will be a pause in your campaign, and it's good to have clarity going to this beforehand. Again, expectation setting is going to be the biggest thing here, so just make sure that they know this ahead of time so it's not a surprise. Then once you have approvals, you want to go ahead and get your clients' photos. I do not let them use logos. I want to have smiling, high quality headshots, and ideally I like to have multiple photos. That way we can diversify them just for deliverability reasons. But again, don't let your client send you some crappy frowning picture or cool artsy picture or their company logo. You want to have something that is a high quality headshot. I mean, realistically, iPhone makes it so easy. There's really no excuse to not do this. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and purchase the domains and emails. I like to make sure to diversify the credit cards I'm buying those domains and emails on, also the platforms I'm buying those domains and emails on. And I really want to do this because if we're building our whole business and we're using one card, which maybe could get locked or compromised or could get flagged, if we're using one domain platform or one email platform, your business is built on sand. So make sure not to be lazy or cheap and diversify where you're getting domains and emails. And if you're crazy like me, diversify the cards you're buying them on too, because better be safe than sorry. Now, once your domains and emails are purchased, you can go ahead and start warm up. We even diversify our warm-up tools. I think that's less important than where you get your emails and domains, but we also do diversify our warm-up tools just to make sure we're never too platform dependent. And our initial warm-up is normally going to be 2 to 3 weeks, but that doesn't include the ongoing warm-up we do while we're running our campaigns. So we never actually turn warm-up off. More on that in our Instantly or Smartlead guides, so you can check them out on a channel. Now, if you do need to launch as soon as possible for your client, maybe to have a deadline, conference, something coming up, you can always set up separate domains and emails that you launch understanding they'll be burned. So separate from your main domains and emails, this set would be just to launch and burn if there's a tight deadline. I try not to do this, but sometimes I have done this when there is a tight deadline with a client, and if it takes it to the sale, you certainly can make it happen. Step 4 in service delivery is going to be list building. So for list building, you are going to need to have multiple softwares to build lists. Some clients want you to filter by technology, others want e-com, others want software, some want enterprise clients, some want local businesses. Because of this, you're going to end up paying for quite a few softwares, and normally it ends up being a new software every client for your first 2 clients, and then you get kind of a core tech stack that you can maintain. Like at Done For You Meetings, we have around 15 tools we pay for because we have quite a few clients in quite a few different industries. So that is something to expect. Now, since your clients are going to be targeting different industries, there's not really going to be a best tool. Again, it depends on the list, but if you do want to see how we do list building, there are videos on tools like Find Email and also Apollo on my channel, which are pretty universal. So another thing I mentioned before in a strategy section, but it's important that you start building your lists after your clients already agreed on parameters. You don't want to say yes to things that aren't possible to filter. Like one of the most common things I get is, can you filter by revenue? Which it's like, in reality, there's no way to know what revenue a random e-com store is doing. We can only filter revenue if we're targeting public companies. So never lie to your clients about this. Just be honest with them, explain why, and normally it'll be fine. Now, once we build our list, we want to have a plan and a time to launch. If we build our lists and they sit for 1 or 2 months, those contacts are slowly becoming invalid as people change their emails, delete their emails, or whatever. So we want to make sure that we're launching our lists a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. A maximum of 2 to 3 weeks after we build them. But ideally, we're looking at only days here. Now, once you're building the list, if you ever can't figure out how to build a list, it's important you communicate this to your client. Now, one thing you'll see is a theme of this video is like set expectations and communicate. People don't normally get upset at things unless you're hiding them from them. So if you're ever like, hey, we can't get enough contacts, I like to tell our clients as it's happening and keep them informed as we troubleshoot figuring out a new way to build that list. And then once we're done, I typically send them a sample of around 20 to 30 contacts that we can look it over, ask any questions, and approve. Sometimes we'll also do this on a call. Now, what I don't like to do is send them the entire list, because some people will go through and be like, I don't like this company because of this reason or that. And it's not like a yes-no thing you can filter by, it's just personal thoughts. So I try not to send the entire list just to avoid having slowdowns. And then if you haven't by now, make sure you go ahead and cross-check the list you've built to the client's do not contact list. I normally ask them this in onboarding, but if you haven't, make sure to ask them, because you don't want to reach out to any of your past clients, current clients, people in your sales pipeline, as that might tick them off and ultimately lose you your client. The 5th step here is going to be script writing. Now, for every campaign is normally defined as a certain target. So for example, e-commerce businesses or software companies or e-commerce businesses that are running ads or not running ads. So it's a pretty broad parameter. We'll normally do a 2 email sequence with an A/B test. Now, depending on how many contacts, we'll also add in more varieties of tests, but we always do a minimum of A and B test, so 2 tests. And we're also testing out different case studies, call to actions, how long or short the copy is, pain points, and also just general style. Now, as we scale that campaign, we continue to add even more variations. Some of our campaigns have over 30 variations, so like A, B, C, D, E, and it goes on. We've even had some where we've already gotten to Z, so we have like A2, B2. But those are campaigns that have been running for a very long time and have tons of variety. Now, cold email is a little bit different of copywriting now than it was even 3 years ago, because it used to be, let's test copy over and over and eventually get the perfect script. And then we're just testing like a few sentences or like 1 call to action. And now with deliverability, it's pretty easy to get your copy flagged. So in reality, we're not looking for the best script. We're looking for a high volume of good scripts using good principles. So don't get too obsessed over the perfect script. It's more about having scripts that work well, but not the best, but having a high volume of them so you continue to land in the inbox. Now, when you've been around for a while, eventually you're just going to kind of know how to write copy, or you'll have structures you know work for certain industries. And as you get to this point, you're often just adapting your scripts as opposed to writing from scratch. And this is where you have a lot of scripts that you could use to actually train an AI model to help write your client's scripts. Again, that won't be in this video, but we do have that in Grow B2B, which is in description if you want to check it out. Now, once we finish our script, we go ahead and send it over to our client. Sometimes we'll do this just on text, or other times we'll do a review call with them. Now, typically on the first 2 to 3 scripts, we need to have some back and forth changes and get some approvals on things. But eventually, as your client gets to know you and you know your client, often you don't actually need to get approvals as long as they give you like authorization, or those approvals just become faster and faster. Now, before we actually launch that campaign, we want to make sure there's no spam words in it, because there are some words in cold emails that can trigger spam filters. So we go ahead and remove these, and we have our own spam checker. It's free. It's dfimeetings.com/spam-checker. And then once that's done, we add spin tags. If you need help on spin tags, there's a video on my channel. And then we go ahead and launch the campaign and send it out. Step 6, we're going to go ahead and launch our campaigns. Now that you have your domains, emails, lists, and scripts approved, it's time to actually get some traction. Now, depending on how high our volume of campaigns are, sometimes we'll use multiple sending tools. Now, for most people, just starting with Instantly or Smartlead makes sense, but if you have a client where we're sending hundreds of thousands or millions of emails per month, we really don't want to have one platform be a liability, so we'll continue to scale up the number of sending platforms we use. So, get your campaigns live, and once they're live, normally it's a great time to recap expectations for clients, such as when will we know if this campaign works or doesn't? How soon could a lead come in? What do we do if a lead comes in? Again, that over communication is going to help a ton with retention. And if you don't do that, your client will think you're not working. So it's very important that you communicate more than you think you need to. Now, a couple bonus here. One, before we actually send out the campaign to people, we'll send it to one of our own emails just to make sure it's formatted correctly and there's no issues with merge fields or spin tags. And a second bonus here is we add all of our team and employee emails into a campaign where they can respond to the cold email. Obviously, we're not forwarding that to our clients. It's not real, but you can do that to increase the engagement, which helps with your long-term deliverability. Step 7 is going to be appointment setting. Now, for all of our clients, we actually don't do their appointment setting. I also don't recommend you do their appointment setting. Now, let me explain why. If you are doing appointment setting for 1, 2, or multiple companies, first off, you can't get that in depth on any of them. Also, the setters you're going to hire are going to be really expensive if they can actually really understand a client's business, which is going to require you to charge more and make it harder to get a return to your client. 3, often good companies are going to have a full SDR team and they know exactly how to turn a positive reply into a lead. So I found that it just adds too much complexity, and for most of the best clients I've had, they already have a great sales team, so this is totally normal to them. Now, we do, however, have a system that makes it really easy for them to go ahead and manage these positive replies and sends them into a centralized place, in our case Slack, that way they never miss one. Now, this is a bit interesting. So when you send your client a lead, we don't want them to just email that lead, because then we can't control the deliverability. So what we will do is we send them a form where they can reply in the form, and then we put that reply into an email and CC them. That way we're maintaining the email thread, but then our client gets CC'd into it on their real email and they can maintain that conversation. And again, the whole idea here is we have thread integrity, meaning the whole conversation is in one thread as opposed to having it on multiple different threads and just lost and confusing for the prospect. Now, one thing to note here is while we don't actually do appointment setting for our clients, we will provide support. We have templates, audits, consulting calls, review calls, and sometimes we'll do it live with them. Because at the end of the day, even if it's not a deliverable, if your client gets business, they will continue to pay you. And the way to make real money is with retention. So don't shy away from helping, but I don't recommend actually doing the appointment setting. Another note here is we also like to make sure our clients are encouraged to respond to people fast. A lot of times they'll take their time on the weekends or after 5 p.m., especially if it's a sales team and not an owner, and that doesn't really fly. So we always try to provide positive support and encouragement that they respond to leads as fast as possible. And we also like to actually make sure that they aren't missed. So sometimes they'll miss a lead and we can go through a bump and be like, hey, you missed this lead, make sure to get back to them. And a last note here, for our top clients, we'll also give them advice on calling their leads or even set up basic retargeting ads. So when someone goes to their website to book a call on their calendar, there's a pixel and they can go ahead and retarget them. So that's something we do with people as we work with them and build a relationship and want them to succeed as much as possible. Now that you're at this point, it's time for reporting. And reporting is a step that I think a lot of people just don't consider because it's relatively boring. Now, I don't really think it matters how you report to your clients as opposed to that you're doing it regularly. and you have a standardized way to do it. You can do it with a dashboard, with messages, with calls, video updates, or a whole combination. For us, we typically do messages and calls. We used to do a dashboard, but since we use a lot of sending tools, having all the data go to one place can be a little bit complicated, so we mainly do messages and calls. So one thing to note here is that when we're doing reporting, we try to make everything very logical. We try to report in two core ways. There's deliverability and there's performance. Deliverability is, are we doing everything we can for lists, emails, domains, sending settings, everything deliverability related. So we want to make it very clear, hey, our emails are going in inbox, but they're not working, or but they are working, or whatever it may be. We want to make it clear, because if you're just like, hey, no one's responding, but it's a deliverability problem, your client might think it's their offer. Or if it's not a deliverability problem, your client needs to know it's their offer. And second is performance. That is the lead rate, the booked call rate, everything that comes down to revenue and your client getting paid. So we try to make sure they understand the difference between those two metrics. Now, also, one thing to note is I see this a ton in beginners. If you're overly apologetic on every small mistake or every campaign that didn't work in your reporting, everything will become your fault. There's a polite boundary between accepting your errors and making yourself seem undesirable. And what I mean by this, like if cold email, we're doing testing. A lot of tests will not work. Over time, we'll know what works and more tests will work. But if we apologize for every test that failed, that makes it sound like we're incompetent. Where in reality, we want to be logical. Like, hey, we tried this test. Deliverability was good. It didn't work. Here's what we think. What do you think? And then focus on tests that did work. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I see so many times where beginners are just too apologetic. Now, you do also want to be proactive on taking feedback and then using that for future campaigns and pointing out where you did it. That will win you brownie points with your clients. And again, if you don't communicate, you're not going to get credit. So there's a couple notes on reporting that have helped us a lot. Now, let's talk a little bit about scaling cold emails. So the first question when we're considering scaling cold emails is how many contacts are actually available in the total addressable market. If the total addressable market is quite small, it maybe makes sense to have more emails per prospect per year, where if you have a massive market, there's no reason to do a 6 email sequence. Now, if your total addressable market is really small, you can sometimes add in personal emails or like info@ emails or company name at gmail.yahoo.com emails. You just need to understand the risks of doing so. And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. It depends how small that market is. Now, if the market is large and you're sending cold emails, the main problem I see that prevents people from successfully scaling to hundreds of thousands of contacts is copy fatigue. Copy fatigue is when you take good copy, you send too much of it, and then it gets flagged. Now, I have people come to me all the time, they're like, yeah, we were sending this email, it worked great, and it just stopped working. Maybe the market changed. The market doesn't change in 2 months normally. It's more likely that your copy worked, you got excited, you sent too much of it, it got flagged as spam, and now it can't get through. So there's 3 things we want to keep in mind when we are scaling. The first one is spin tax. We want to spin tax our copy. 2, variations, A, B, C, and D. And 3, we want to add more tests and targets at all times. That way we have tons of variety in our sending. And you should be doing all 3 all the time. Now, another thing to note, it should go without saying, but some people don't know this, is that you should have a clear expectation set for your client on how pricing changes based on scaling. This should be in your initial contract they sign. Even if they're signing on for 5,000 prospects a month on a retainer, you should have a note on what happens if they go to 10, 20, 30,000. By upselling your clients and increasing your volume, you're going to make more money per client, and that's going to help you build wealth and also help your client make more money. Now, if you do have a client that's targeting larger companies, you could also increase their contacts by cross-department selling. So instead of selling to one person in a company, maybe identify 6 or 7 different departments with different titles and increase the volume that way. That has helped us a ton, especially for our clients that do go after those Fortune 1000 companies, where you can get like 30 or 40 contacts that all do the similar thing but are unrelated because like cross companies or departments. So definitely consider that if you are targeting big companies. Now, I want to share a couple bonus retention strategies we use. So the first one, I mentioned this a couple times, but it's highly unlikely you get credit for work that's done in quiet or work that is unreported. So if you are really struggling to figure something out and you're doing tons of research, tell your client. Or if you are trying to learn something new specifically for your campaign, Tell them. If you're figuring out new automation for their campaign, tell them. You want to make sure that work you're doing behind the scenes gets noticed and you get credit for it. So just vocalize the work you're doing for them. They're going to appreciate it. Now, another concept is a philosophy around being right and getting paid. And this has to do with ego in business. So if there's ever a disagreement with a client, first thing I consider is if I'm actually in the right. Because sometimes in a moment you might be like, yeah, I'm right. But in reality, maybe you didn't communicate, you didn't set expectations, whatever. And if I am right, what I'm going to consider is if it costs me $200 to be right, but I lose a client, is it worth it? Meaning, let's say that they approved a list and want to change it. It cost me $200 to change it to be right, but I lose a client that pays me $5,000 a month. Is it worth it? No, it's not. So we want to make sure that we're considering that whenever we make decisions and we don't lead by ego. I know those are pretty basic, but I still wanted to mention them because I think it does affect especially a lot of younger agency owners. Now we're almost through the service delivery guide, but a couple more technical tutorials I'm going to link below, such as how we onboard clients, how we avoid going to spam, instantly, Smartlead, how we do strategy, how we do Apollo, how we do cold email writing. It's all going to be in the description, so make sure to check those out. And there you have it. That is the service delivery framework that's allowed us to do around $2 million in revenue with B2B lead generation and scale to over 100K a month. Now, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more. And if you do want to work together one-on-one to grow your own B2B lead gen agency, check out Grow B2B, which is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.